Welcome to another episode of On Authentic Leadership with the Colonel and the Coach. I'm Cam Ellsworth. With me, as always, is the Colonel, Matt Smith. And today we've got a special guest, one of my deepest, dearest friends, lifelong friend now, Jason Kersner, current head coach at Sioux City in the USHL, and somebody we go back almost since the beginning of my coaching career. Jason, welcome.
Cam, Colonel, pleasure to be here and have a discussion. Anytime I can talk culture, leadership, anything like that is fun. I got my notepad here. I'm ready to exchange ideas.
Perfect. Welcome.
Jace, you usually start if you could just maybe give like a brief overview of where you're at currently and a little bit about what you're up to and your current.
Yeah, head coach of the Sioux City Musketeers in the USHL. Just completed my third season there. I just got back home, completed our 2 drafts that we have, and we will have our main camp to start selections for next year's team June 10th. So we remain kind of busy, a little bit of a downtime here for a couple of weeks before we go back. And then we'll have the off season kind of June 15th to mid-August till we head back out to start season 4. It's been an unbelievable journey the last 3 years. Sioux City, as you know, Cam, from being there, is a incredibly special place to have the opportunity to work and lead. I'm surrounded by many people that you still know and are still friends with from a ownership and management perspective. And then obviously, you know, the opportunity to coach at the highest level in America and work with elite young athletes and be a part of their development, obviously on the ice, but as much off the ice. It's a special job and it's a fun place to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, I was there. I started my coaching career there. That's where you and I met, and we're kind of coming full circle with you being the head coach. And I'd like to come back there. I think it's worth talking about. Just when I was telling Colonel Smith about you, I think the best way, you kind of self-made, right? You don't have that hockey resume that you pull up on elite prospects that screams, hey, that's the next head coach.
Yeah, I'll try to keep the bio quick, but certainly an unconventional path. Now, certainly I live in a suburb right outside Washington, D.C., so I think it's more of a hockey market in the last maybe 15 years, but certainly not when I was growing up around here. And played hockey, and we all like to think we were good, and I think I was pretty good for my little circle that I was in. But love the game, and I had a younger brother who, you know, Jared, who's head coach in the North American Hockey League in Johnstown. And just having a younger brother and had the opportunity to maybe stick around and just be around his practices and help push pucks. And I kind of started to fall in love with teaching and coaching. Not so much leadership. I don't think I knew what that was at that point, but it was pretty clear as I got to graduating high school age that playing hockey was not going to be a significant part of my future. But I wanted to find ways to be a coach, to be a teacher. So that, to your point, started with there was no money to be made, you know, coaching youth hockey at that time. So I'm bartending at PF Chang's. That was a fun few years of my life. And I was coaching at that time, you know, just helping my brother's team, the local U16 team, U14 team, U18 team. And it just, I got really inspired by, and I had a couple of really good mentors and guys that allowed me to kind of tag along and be a part of it. And so that's what kind of started the itch. And then, yeah, from not having played collegiately, not having been coached by anybody at really kind of elite levels, I had to find different ways to kind of get my foot in the door. The first, from an education standpoint, like I said, I had a couple really good early mentors that, you know, names Nelson Bird and Rob Potter, guys that were influential in trying to give me their knowledge and share and be open and let me be their volunteer assistant coach locally, things like that. But then I had to find other ways. And for me, first and foremost, especially at that time, now there's podcasts like this and there's YouTube and there's other ways. But back then there was just a couple ways to do it. One, first and foremost, it was reading. I turned to a voracious reading habit. I sit in my library here with thousands of books. And so that first and foremost, I think, was my education into coaching. The second one was, there was very few, but there was some like coaching seminars and opportunities to get on a flight, use all my bartending money to go sit in a coaching symposium. I can remember for many years going to Roger Nielsen's in Windsor, Ontario. And I'm 19, 20 years old. And, you know, I'm just kind of going by myself to these coaching symposiums to try to learn more about the game and leadership. And then finally, it was just the networking aspect. And I was coaching the U16, U18 teams. You're out there scouting and bumping into coaches on the road and having a few beers and talking hockey and learning like that became such an integral part of who I became as a leader and a coach. And started, obviously, I think with you and obviously some other guys out east, SB and guys like that. But then the opportunity to, on my own dime, fly out to Sioux City and sleep on your floor in your apartment and be around Luke and so many other coaches. That was kind of the start of it. And then I did that for years, just kind of on my own dime, flying around, showing up to camps, working hockey clinics, just doing anything I could to just be around people, first and foremost to learn, and then obviously to make some connections to try to climb the ladder.
When I first met Jason, I went to his parents' house and he's showing me this library. It's insane, all these books that he's read. But when you open them up, they're all highlighted. And he's got highlighters and everything, right? So that's pretty cool. But I'm like, all right, what do you do with that? Well, so he's got the highlights transcribed into notes, right? I'm like, that must have taken you a lot of time. He's like, I don't know. I hired my sister, right? You still do. I don't know if you do that, but you had the angles, right?
Yeah. I was always good at doing that. Even my middle school and high school career, I somehow found a way to to outsource some of my work. But yeah, I mean, especially, I mean, I still love reading, and it's probably the only healthy habit that I have remaining in my life. But especially, like I said, we're going back 25, 30 years ago, the internet was just kind of getting started. It was way harder to make connections and to Google something, or now if I want to learn something about I don't care if it's leadership or even a hockey thing, I can go on the coach's site or NHL Coaches Association. I can watch a seminar about power play, and none of this stuff existed back then. So we had to find we had to read, and we had to find ways to get a quest for that.
And I think it was always something that you talked about. I want to talk about kind of I don't know, to me, it was like the epiphany moment in Sioux City, but you did a lot of reading. And I think at that time there was a lot more football, right? It was a lot more, and that's, you'll say it better, but there's more forward thinking maybe in that sport, or definitely was traditionally, right? If somebody came up with a new scheme that nobody's seen before, it'd be very like, it was praised. Whereas hockey, there's an archaic part to the sport. And so that was something with you not necessarily being this high level player and learning from a different way. Like you always had this opening kind of learning idea to you, right? And I don't know if you could talk to that, because that was always something I found to be really refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought of it that way, but I would agree, looking back on it, that my open-mindedness to new things and trying to be outside the box and things probably does come from that. Like you said, I didn't play on a team or for a coach or multiple coaches as I went through maybe my junior hockey career, my college hockey career, my professional hockey career, none of which I had, that I was ingrained with, this is the right way to do things, or we do this because that's the way it's always been done. And yeah, you're right. So there was limited books and resources on ice hockey. So much more of that, my kind of early learnings was from, like you said, it could have been football, basketball, a lot of really good, Phil Jackson, and baseball, Joe Torre and Tony La Russa. So you're learning different management and leadership concepts. And I didn't just rely on sports books, right? And all history and biographies and anything that I thought would be intriguing to me. So yeah, you're reading all that, you're highlighting that, and you're getting new ideas and thinking about new things. And in the early days, you're doing all that in your bartending, so you don't even really have a chance to put any of it into practice until you started coaching. And then, and it's great. I don't want to give off the impression that the answers are found in books. I mean, you do have to put your feet in the fire and you do have to get there. But I do think it was a fertile learning environment to come up with different ideas, to see things from a different paradigm or lens, and to be able to try things. And I do think even now, to your point about that, I know you and I have talked from a business perspective, because I spent a lot of time as an entrepreneur. I believe in the blue ocean strategy. I think anything that I can do that's a little bit outside the box or a little bit unique can be a competitive advantage for myself in my own program and leadership and what I'm trying to do on a day-to-day basis, but maybe even on the ice. I think there's some advantages to be found in doing things a little bit differently.
So, Jason, when you meet with your teams or you're addressing whether it's a season or whether it's a camp or something like that, do you have a leadership like philosophy that you either live by or that you articulate to them? For example, I'll just use mine. So mine is, lead from where you fall in, listen to understand, and leave a legacy of excellence, right? And that can apply to anything, athletics, sports, business, depending upon the situation. But I just didn't know if you had something that through all those different experiences that you've had that you've kind of globbed onto and modified over time.
Yeah, I have. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of Not even hockey coaches, but I don't even know what we would call these. Maybe peak performance coaches would be maybe the best way to kind of do those. And the guys from Focus 3 were the best. And so, yeah, mine is simple. It's what we call the performance pathway. And that's leadership creates culture. Culture drives behavior. Behavior produces results. That's exactly my systematic approach to leading any team or group that I'm with.
And then just as a follow up to that, like, first of all, I really like that. There's a generation of athletes, specifically some of which are, obtaining a lot of money via NIL and other means just while they're in school. And so you can think, I don't necessarily need to read that book because I'm getting the experience, or I'm going to get leadership experience through being an officer or being whatever, a non-commissioned officer or a senior NCO and all that sort of stuff, and not realizing that if you don't study or just review history, whether that's athletic history or national history or world history and all that sort of stuff, you're bound to repeat those mistakes and not take advantage of the opportunities. I just want to talk to that because you're fairly young and there's a lot of opportunity in front of you just from a coaching perspective. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think they have to be combined. As you know, leadership is an art, it's not a science. But I think it was General Mattis that said anyone who's not read thousands of books is functionally illiterate. It's what I call inexpensive experience versus expensive experience, right? And repeating the errors of history or not listening again. Now it could be through an audiobook or a podcast or anything, but not taking advantage of not just the mistakes from history and our past, obviously is some of the really good stuff. And to me, just going through that expensive experience and making all those mistakes yourself, it's not the best way to go about it. But with all that being said, life is not a book, leadership is not a book, and there's a significant art, and there's nothing like having your feet in the fire and being involved in those adverse moments, whether that be in the middle of a game or more importantly nowadays with dealing with our athletes and something that they're going through. There's no time to push pause and go run and check your highlights and then come back and deal with it. But I do think just having a bank of knowledge and using that stuff to help you in the day to day is useful.
How is your experiences that you've had both as a player, as a coach, just as a human being affected your leadership style, right? So when I say style, like how you carry yourself, whether it's in the office and you're meeting with a prospect, or whether you're meeting with a draftee, or whether you're meeting with whomever, and has that style like morphed over time? You talked about it, the leadership culture and behavior, right? I think it's purposeful that the culture is probably in the middle of the sandwich between those two things. But I saw Cam shape that culture through his behavior, through his actions, through his leadership, through identifying lessons from, like, Norm Potter. Cam, is that who your coach was? Yeah, years and years ago. But yeah, so if you could talk to that, Jason, I'd appreciate your perspective on that.
To Cam's point, that growth and maturity process in me, that's where it's come from. And in terms of trying to maybe do things a little bit differently. And it's certainly not that I'm the only coach, but one that really thinks about players first and servant leadership. And look, at the end of the day, the vision that we're trying to enact there in Sioux City is I want a place where people are inspired to come to the rink to do their work daily. We want them to feel safe when they're there. And what do I mean by that? Most importantly, they're free to be themselves, that they're empowered, and then return home fulfilled at the end of the day. And that's the environment. I define my job as to create an environment where people can do their best work. As the head coach, as the leader, I'm in charge of the environment. And that's the vision, that's the environment that I'm working to create, and it has changed how I've gone about that and the systematic approach to how I work at creating that environment and that performance pathway has changed immensely over the years. And I will tell you this, it's a work in progress. Again, take that performance pathway. Again, leadership creates culture, culture drives behavior, behavior produces results. If I'm just looking back at this season, we were average. We had an average season. So if you just reverse engineer all of that, that means that's because we had average leadership. So I don't have the answers, and we're a work in progress. And some days and some years are better than others. But now that the season's over, it's an important time to pause and reflect and find ways to come at that systematic approach better. So, next year is better than average.
Yeah, I'm envious that you get to be a head coach, and the way you talk about the creating the environment is just, I don't know. you take it for granted when you're in the seat. Maybe perhaps I took it for granted at certain times, and I just hear you talking about it, and it just there's a fire burning inside of you to get back to that, just to shape human beings and to create that culture and try to achieve success by modifying the behavior for the good and all that sort of stuff. So, anyways, I'm getting fired up. There's only like about 117 times where Cam was talking in the locker room where I literally wanted to like run through the wall. And so, anyways, I would imagine it would be the same if I was to show up in Sioux City. I'd probably be very fired up.
Yeah, I would agree, Colonel. And I guess I will maybe try to just trace some of this for Matt, for other people, and how intertwined Jason and I were. Again, two young guys. I call it the Nick Sorkin connection, right? So I'm recruiting a kid. Jason's coaching a kid at a team Maryland, Nick Sorkin, and we don't end up with him. We end up trading for him, I believe. But so Jason ends up in Sioux City. We've been friends, but my boss at the time, our friend Luke Strand, who's head coach at Mankato, we've talked about him a little bit. Like he, for my money, the people I've been around, he's as good as anybody on the ice. He's as good as anybody with X's and O's. And Luke was literally our teacher, right? I don't know, Jason, if we could say it any better. And I mean, we were getting a PhD in hockey, like X's and O's, and the epiphany moment. I remember sitting at the little what the heck's the hotel there next door?
Stony Creek Inn.
Stony Creek Inn at the hotel, and we're watching hockey, and we're doing systems on salt and pepper shakers, and we got it. And I had taught it to Jason, and there was this epiphany moment, and it was literally like playing chess on ice. And then when I got the job, and we both believed in it, right? Like Jason was doing post game breakdowns at his U16 level, like nobody was doing at the time, right? And just putting hours into player development and system development. And then you brought up Norm, and Norm had a different approach, and it wasn't as detailed X's and O's, and it had a different human culture piece to it. And it was different than what Jason and I would talk about. And we were winning like all the time. And I can remember Jason, like, what are you guys doing there? It had detail, it had structure, but it had this other element to it. And to Jason's credit was like that growth mindset, right? And then you started down this path. And that's about the time maybe Skipjacks came along. Would that be fair?
Yeah, maybe a little bit after that, because I think I went to New Mexico for that year, maybe in between. So, and then a year back at DC. So yeah, kind of a couple years after you had gotten to Lowell, I think. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. A lot of my early learning from some really good local coaches and mentors, and the opportunity to study football and stuff. A lot of it was technical based and X's and O's and what I would call management, not leadership. I think there was a high emphasis on attention to details and organization, and probably at that time being a little bit ahead of the curve with technology and things like that were really good. And leadership was just came after that, right? Like the human element and that component of leadership, and some of the things I was talking about earlier as it relates to my philosophy and how I think about things now were not really a part of it at all. And then I do think you going to Lowell and then starting to meet other, and me getting more involved in hockey and starting to travel more and meet other people. And you start to just learn that there's other elements. And then you find out that those elements are even way more important than what forecheck you're using, because you can win with any one of them. And then, yeah, I think you're right. Then the kind of the deep dive into now at that point, yeah, you can still read books, but now you're getting into the age where podcasts and YouTube and the internet, and it's easier to go try. I now have more coaching friends that you're working at Lowell and he's working there. And you're kind of really able to dive way deeper into leadership than just the technical aspects of coaching.
Jason, question. You seem like somebody who's always just open to input, right? Which is not easy, right? Like just depending upon someone's own personal human behavior. They might think that they're a great athlete, they're a great coach, or they're a great student or whatever. And it's like, I know how smart I am. My report cards or my performance reports tell me how smart I am. That's something that we try to work on a lot, right? It's just being open to input and willing to accept just a new style or a new way of doing things. And arguably, most of the time, it wasn't even on the ice. It was like off the ice, like be willing to accept input and like, let's try this as something that might work. If you can connect with that guy, I'll connect with this guy, and then divide and conquer type thing. But I don't know, maybe it's not just humility. Maybe it's just, if you will, like an open-mindedness. And I say that because that's just something that I just battled with, not in a bad way, but just always tried to make sure that creating that environment where being humble and approachable, if you will, was a necessity.
Yeah, my term for it is an intellectual curiosity. And I don't know why I was gifted with that, but I do think that if I have one strength, it would be that. I really do curious. I'm open-minded. I care. Like I said, the only good habit I have remaining is reading. I love, I'm content just sitting there reading and listening to somebody else's experiences and their thoughts and what they've been through. And now same, these kind of conversations, probably like Cam, we're always on the phone with other coaches and exchanging ideas. And I don't know why or where that came from, but that's an important part of who I am, one. But I think more important than that is I've been unbelievably fortunate that I've been in situations where I'm able to experiment. I call it a leadership laboratory. So to Cam's point, me and my brother started our own business, our own teams, the Skipjacks Hockey Club. And that was a leadership laboratory. That was an opportunity for us we weren't going to get fired. We owned it, right? So we had the opportunity. If we wanted to try, to your point, it might be something on the ice, but it could have been something totally different from how we communicate with the players or what time we do the meetings or how we do the meetings, any of those things. We were free to experiment and try all of them, whether we read in a book or because Cam said, hey, we're doing this at Lowell or whatever. We had the opportunity to do that stuff. And then I moved up the coaching ladder to the NCDC but I was the head coach and the general manager. And I did have an owner. I had a boss that I had to report to, but he was amazing and left me free to run the program anywhere I wanted. And it's the same here in Sioux City. That's what makes Sioux City such an unbelievable place to work. I have such support from our owner, Lloyd Ney, and our CEO, who's still good friends with Cam, Travis Morgan. And I have a support staff that handles almost everything for me and just allows me to coach the team. And I've been here 3 years and not one time has anybody told me, hey, we should do this way, or why are you doing that? So sometimes I'll get a question because they're interested and they're curious, but I really am free to run the program in the way that I see fit, which is not the same for every person coaching. Like I get that. So I am just extremely fortunate that where I work now, and obviously, when you're an entrepreneur and your own boss, that gives you the freedom to do that a little bit better. But yeah, so I think to the first part, the intellectual curiosity, I don't know where it comes from, but that's there with me daily, one. And then two, I think more importantly, the freedom to be able to test ideas and to try things.
So, Jace, who is your wingman in your role just with the Musketeers in your capacity? I know associate coaches, assistant coaches, there's the leadership group, right? The guys that wear the CZAs and all that sort of stuff. And despite a voracious intellectual curiosity, how do you make sure that, like, okay, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been on the ice for whatever, 40 years of your life, if you will. What is your methodology for making sure that, like, I understand the leadership strategy, I'm well read, I talk to my bros that are out there in the wild. I'm always trying to modify my thing, but I know that I have blind spots. What is the process by which you make sure that, like, okay, my life or my job as head coaching is 360 degrees? How do I make sure that I've got all the bases covered?
First and foremost, for me, that's to the players. That's who I rely on. I've had 5 different assistant coaches in just my 3 years here, all of whom have been outstanding, and many of whom have moved on to other higher roles already. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's those conversations, but those are secondary to me, to the ones that I have with players. And as you said, that's generally the leadership group, whatever that looks like on a given season. I rely on that more than anything. Again, I'm trying to build a program that is solely based on the players. And so any of these ideas or the latest historical quote I read or conversation with a different coach or whatever, that all gets filtered first and foremost through the players, because what I think, what I like, none of that matters. At the end of the day, they're the athletes that, and again, especially at our level, it's extremely long season. We play 62 regular season games and then playoffs. They show up end of August and they haven't even passed out the league trophy yet. So you're going from end of August to Memorial Day. So any of that stuff, to me, I hope I'm answering your question properly, is vetted first and foremost by the players. And those are conversations that we have in person. But also, as you know, as the leader, the job never ends. And it's me sitting on my couch at 8 o'clock, watching a hockey game, or getting off the phone and then texting, hey, what do you guys think about this? I'm thinking about doing this tomorrow. Let's stop by the office as soon as you get there. Just stuff like that.
specifically the last piece you talked about with the players, there has to be the level of trust, right? The trust is a two-way street. You trust them, you empower them to do what they need to do on the ice and off the ice, and they trust the fact that the words coming out of your mouth are genuine and pure and have their best interests at heart.
So, and to your point of that, Colonel, I couldn't agree more. When I went through that performance pathway and I said a systematic approach to each of those, I have a systematic approach to leadership that has just 6 disciplines in it, pillars, if you will. But the first one is to build trust, and the pillars that I use to get there are character, competence, and connection, which are to me ethical trust, technical trust, and personal trust. And like you said, there is no achieving results or doing anything we want if we don't have foundation of trust. And it takes time and it takes effort, and you guys know that better than anybody. But yeah, so the foundation for my leadership is about building trust.
I also would share that, Jason does have a unique perspective. And I believe that the way he earned and grew and elevated through the sport gives him a dynamic approach to it and also a fresh look, right? And so I don't think necessarily that those pressures aren't there, that Sioux City is this magic utopia. Everybody wants to win. What I do think is that in my conversations with Jason over a lot of time is that he gets it more than most. I talk to him, and Colonel, you're probably hearing a lot of echoes because of I talk to him as much as anybody. But his ability whenever I would feel stress and to talk about whether it's different techniques or different perspectives or different ways to look at things. I'm not taking anything away from the wonderful people in Sioux City, but I do think it's worth recognizing that somebody else could be in Sioux City and feel totally different. I think it's more of the way that Jason approaches his day, and because of the work that he's put in, it allows him to go and feel free to go and do his things. And I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the coolest things in the leadership laboratory, Jace, that I ever thought, and Colonel, you'll probably get a kick about this. I never told you about this one. He can do whatever he wants. And in his office, he's got a big office. He went and he spent a bunch of money to buy or rent or do whatever and all this office furniture. Right. And there's office furniture and there's TVs and there's videos and there's plugins. And by the end of his time there, a lot of that office furniture had been relocated and there's been some couches so that Jason could just sit and chat with his players and just the evolution of from going from all of the whiteboards and all of the X's and O's and all of that technical stuff to just some couches where some guys can just talk about real things. I just thought was like one of the coolest things that I saw in that progression and that I got to see in real time. Jason, I don't know if you can maybe talk just a little bit about it, because again, to me, that was like really, really, really transformative in our sport with men and kids and pressures and everything. And just for you to take that leap, like what you got out of that.
That was the kind of maturity and the growth process as it related to what I would call leadership. And how do you make those connections and how do you build that trust and those interpersonal relationships? And that's just with time. And to your point, it's one of the kind of missing links that we have in Sioux City. I'm in the same office, Cam, that you were in Sioux City, however many years, 15 years ago or whatever that was back then. And it's small. And by the time you put the desks and everything in there, we've made as many changes as we can to try to make it more inviting for guys to be in there. But I think there's one thing coaches will say, oh, I have an open door policy, and the door is half open and guys walk by and walking around on eggshells. Nobody wants to talk to the coach, right? And that's the epitome of the environment that I wanted to not have. I will say it's 99% from the players' side. There's a 1% selfishness side to it. I want to enjoy going to work. I want to enjoy the time that I'm spending. We spend I just said I'm there for 9-10 months a year, and we get to the office at 7 a.m. We leave at 5 p.m. Who wants to be miserable? Who wants to not enjoy the company of the people that they're around? And so there's that side where the players can come in and we can talk nonsense and NHL sports and college sports, just whatever, those kind of life things. And then there's the serious stuff. But whatever it is, again, the foundation is to build trust, but the end goal is obviously to achieve results. And we're in a results-driven business. I am too. I mean, you're right, Cam. I don't work for amazing people. I've been there 3 years. We have a good record. We've made the playoffs all 3 years, so it's not. We're not the worst team out there. And 2 years ago, we went to the conference final. So we've had success while we've been there. But at the end of the day, it's our job to achieve results. And part of that is winning games. But I do think there's more to winning games than achieving results at our level. There's a player development aspect. We got guys that are moving on to college hockey. We got guys that are NHL draft picks. So there's a part of the results are related to development from the player aspect and player advancement aspect. But some of that too is just, again, we view results from your time in Sioux City and how we interact with the community and how important that our fan base and the greater Siouxland community is to us. That's a result that we look to measure. And then obviously just the personal development. We have 16-year-olds coming from Latvia and from Russia that get dropped off here, and they're in our care for 9 or 10 months. So there's a developmental aspect. With all of those things being said, I don't think we can achieve results from a winning perspective, from a developmental standpoint, if we have not built that great foundation of trust. And I don't know how else you're going to do it without just spending time to build those interpersonal relationships. So to your point, throwing the desks out, putting couches in there, and just making the space and the environment way more open for guys to be able to come in. And sometimes it's, sometimes the guy's in there for 20 minutes, but sometimes it's just even enough of those 20, 30-second interactions in the morning or at the end of the day. Those start to add up over time.
Yeah, I love it. Jace, wanted to take a minute, and I think Colonel Smith's helped me with this, and we want to celebrate people while they're here. And I've publicly told everybody that I know what I think of you, and you know what I think of you, but I just think people should realize just the friend that you are and the person that you are. And I would just give a couple of scenarios. One is Colonel Smith and I were talking today. There's certain lifestyles that are challenging. He lived in one in a military setting that, I don't think we would ever compare. But being in that coaching realm where you're constantly on the road, it can lead to late nights. It can lead to a lot of things, and it can be challenging. You're away from home, you're away from your family. And I just thought, and again, my wife knows Jason really well. I just think that if there's anything I could say, and it comes back to trust, right? It's just that there was never a time where I felt that my best interest as a friend was not taken into Jason's account. And what I mean by that is, I think there's some people like Jason currently is a single guy. Well, maybe a single guy might do something else with a single guy, but I'm a married guy. And he doesn't know I'm a happily married guy. So our night out might be going to the casino, and we both enjoy the casino, but we would spend time at the casino, but it was never ever like, hey, let's go do this or let's go do that. That would be any kind of like anything that would ever be offsides. And again, maybe that sounds like, yeah, that should be just normal, but maybe it's not, in my opinion. The other thing that I would just tell this one example, and Jason talked early about spending all his time and all his money running around, and he did. And what he also did was he accrued maybe like a lifetime membership of Southwest points, right? So my first year here at Norwich, had a pretty good year. And Jason, me, we were like, we're always trying to get better, and we're on the phone. And he's like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. He's like, what if I got a flight? And we ended up getting a hotel in Manchester. I don't know if you remember that, Jace. And
I remember.
Jace flies up from Baltimore, and I drive the family down. We get the pool at the hotel. The wife has the kids, whatever. And him and I basically spend the weekend like doing the quote unquote debrief, before I knew what like the debrief was, Colonel, and just going through my season and with his kind of guidance and how could we get better. And when I look at that, I just don't know a lot of people, right, that would just jump on a plane to come up to spend some time with their friend that was like genuinely happy, that was like genuinely like, I'll come. And yeah, there was probably learning in it from him. And yeah, we had some beers at the time. And like, we literally sat in a hotel room in Manchester, New Hampshire at like a town place and suites, and just
we needed the Marriott points back then. I remember it being like more of like a Best Western or something, but
yeah.
It had the pool for the kids, so that was important.
The pool for the kids. But I just in an effort to hoist up people around us, and not wait for a time later in life to say, oh, what a great person. I want to before kind of moving forward that I let people out there kind of what you mean to me, Jason. You've answered always my calls, been ultimately supportive and made me better. So I wanted just to thank you publicly.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And, that cuts both ways. And it's obviously so much of what brought us together and time that we did spend was on professional development and talking hockey and leadership and things like that. But yeah, man, we've we've grown close personally and that stuff. And we've spent, as time went on, probably more time just talking about the personal aspects of our life and the things that we're going through. And yeah, you can only have a small circle of close friends. So I appreciate you saying that. And you're in my circle.
I appreciate that. Taking a step now, you're an NCDC coach coaching the Rockets hockey club, and Luke Strand wins a championship, moves on to Mankato, and all of a sudden there's an opening. And it's funny because when I looked at your bio, it's something that I don't think enough people even realize. And you talk about the networking piece, but even in your bio now, it still says like for a short period, you were like an assistant coach. And I don't think people realize that was your time, your energy, and you became relevant to Sioux City before there was a job opening there, right? Like you were part of that organization. So when that job opened up, it was almost, it was a very easy decision for them. Not that they're ever easy, but I'm sure that they went through the paces. But there's, I don't know, 16 jobs in that league, and 15 of them maybe don't know who you are, but that specific job, what prepared you for that? And
when I got the job, my quote was, I didn't want to be a USHL head coach. I wanted to be the head coach in Sioux City. And I meant that because from your time there, I was connected to the program. And you may remember it hit me a little bit after the fact. Your so it would have been going into your third year, because your first year there, you were with Notter, right? And then Luke came in, and you and Ricky were the assistants, and then Ricky left, and there was a job opening, and I flew out to camp and I tried to get the assistant job, and I was turned down for it, much to your dismay, because our good friend Luke hired another one of our good friends, Keith Paulson, to be the assistant instead of me. But I remember when I was sitting in IBP and kind of where that little coach's room we used to use next to the ZAM. And I didn't know Luke great, just knew him a little bit from the last kind of year of going out there and spending time with you. And he asked me, he said, "What do you want to do?" I don't know if this was a good answer, because it must have been 30, something like that. So, and I said to him, "I want to be sitting in your seat." That's what I told him. And he said it was a good answer. He liked the answer. I don't know, I don't know, but he was probably going to hire Keith anyways. But which is a good choice, because Keith's awesome. But yeah, so whatever, for 15 years I had been trying to kind of be a part of that program, and then I remained one, because I obviously became close with Luke. He left, but then I had become close with Keith, and Keith stayed. And then so I got the opportunity to meet Brett Larson, who's an amazing coach. And then, Jay was from that same circle. So I got to meet and spend time with Jay. Sioux City has a lineage of unbelievable coaches that predate me, but probably outside of the COVID year, I don't know if there was one year that I missed where I wasn't either at their tryout camp in the summer or somehow connected to the program. And the other thing, that is what makes Sioux City special. It is family. And I know I did get the job, but the only other people they were talking to were other people that were connected to the program. I know for a fact they were getting resumes from people that were way better than anybody that they were talking to. But it really does have that kind of small business family like atmosphere, which is what makes it special.
So now you're coaching. Like I said, you went from kids that were hoping to play at the USHL level to coaching bona fide NHL prospects. You occasionally were working with early commits. That was kind of a thing, but now all your kids are committed. You're dealing with the NIL, the transfer portal, and you've shared some stories, not looking for names, not looking for school names. But I just think from a coach's perspective, the pressures these kids are under, the stresses that they feel, because I think they hide it great, but I think that it's almost heavier now than it's ever been. And I know, again, you do a great job of connecting with some of them, but I can remember just a kid you talked to me about that was like going to a Big Ten school, is like really struggling. And we're talking NHL pick, big time commit. If you could just talk again a little bit about what these kids are going through and how you've talked a little bit about your trust and everything, but just tell whoever's out there, like how challenging it can be for even the elite athlete right now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I don't know, because I can't compare it to the Division III level or whatever. My hypothesis would be it could be even more here because of the microscope they're under with the NHL draft and having a full scholarship. And now in today's world, knowing that a bad month of the season may mean that scholarship doesn't even exist anymore, right? So the pressure that these guys are under is immense. They're under a microscope all the time. And I don't know that it's that healthy. And you're right. I think we spend more time trying to help our athletes deal with the pressure and stress of being a top 1%er than we do anything else. There's obviously practice, and there's workouts, and there's the developmental aspect of that. I'll give you another story that just happened in the playoffs. One of our better players, he's a 19-year-old. So he's going to come back. He's committed to a Big Ten school. He's going to come back and play one more year for us next year, but it'll be a 20-year-old, which is the age out year, is the overage year. And in our league, you can only have 4 of those players on your roster. That's the league rule so those are 2005 birth year players next year. And this guy is a significant contributor to our team. He's our number one player. He's a top 6 forward for us. And he was dog water in the playoffs. I mean, he was just playing at such a low level, and he was on a line with, our leading scorer, who actually led the entire league in scoring. So, and he just couldn't make a play. And I had to break up the line. I had to get our leading scorer away from this guy, after playing together basically all season. And yeah, the playoffs, they come so quick, and they're going on. You don't even have as much time to interact with the guys. So yeah, I had bumped him once or twice and tried to say something, but it obviously didn't work. And then we lose in the second round, and then we have our exit meeting. And you have those kind of good relationships with the guys. You're just like, what's up? What was that? What the hell happened? And he told me, he said, look, the season's coming to end. I know we can only have 4 of us overagers next year. And I thought that if I didn't play perfect, that I would lose my spot here next year. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what? Like, you're one of the best players on our team this year. What next year you're worried about? Like right now, he's coming back next year. We're like, trade him. Like, we expect him to be one of the best players in the entire league, and a leader and a driver for our team. So I share that story just in terms of that, the stories, the pressure, the intensity, the stress, some of it completely made up. Like, this guy could not have been more wrong. And how that then affects his performance, and how he loses sleep at night. And I could give you one of those for every one of our players and every single guy. And again, from dealing with these guys, I think that's the biggest thing, to your point. From the outside in, you could step back and look at that and say, man, this guy's got everything going for him, right? He's 6'2". He's an athlete. He's in great shape. He play hockey, probably come from decent background with some money. He's got a full scholarship. He's an NHL draft pick. You name it, right? Everything about this guy from the outside world looks perfect. Who wouldn't want to trade places with that 18-year-old, budding superstar? But that's not what the day-to-day is like for these guys. And dealing with that and trying to spend the time to have those conversations and try to put the train back on the tracks for guys is, I would say, definitely the most important part of our job.
I was just going to comment. I checked out the Sioux City Musketeer website earlier, and they need an equipment manager. And so, even though I may not play hockey, I think I can fill that role. And then I could substitute as, like, I don't know, like a person who has pseudo leadership experience and be a mentor to young 18, 19-year-olds.
Well, Matt, just to cut you off, the old school Sioux City, Cam was not just the assistant coach; he was also the equipment manager. So we would leave the rink at 10, 11 p.m. after games. We would go for a late dinner and a beer, and now it would be 12 or 1. We'd have to come back and flip the laundry, and Cam would be sharpening his skates at 1:00 in the morning, when I'm just like, can we go back to bed? What are we doing here?
Yeah, no, it was a different time, but it's
resources are better now.
Resources are a little better. Yeah, I remember when we got a full-time equipment guy. I think it was Wads that came in, and all of a sudden all our guys stopped falling down. So Colonel always tells us, we sit, we talk, and he's like, we got to bring some funniness to the podcast, because it just feels like we're just serious all the time, which is like literally 180 degrees from the way that we live.
Yeah.
We just love, and we have a passion for it. So I've got 1 or 2 in mind. I don't know, like in our time together, just funny, crazy stories of something that we did that might be, we could share, just of our comedy, some of the stuff that we did together.
We were somewhere in Connecticut for nationals. I was coaching I think a U18 team. Me and Jared were coaching that team, and you were probably at Lowell at the time recruiting. And we had a business partner that you had known too, because now he was our business partner, but he had a son that was a player that used to play on our teams, that was a good player, that was, recruitable. And it just so happens, and here we are at the time of the PGA as we're recording this, but our business partner, this kid's dad, He looked, doppelganger is probably the right word for it, to Bernard Langer. And we were out for some beverages, and somehow we got this entire place to think that this guy was Bernard Langer. And he's such a great guy. He played along with it. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do anything. He was just playing along. And he was our driver, and man, we pulled out all the stops. I mean, we had him taking pictures, signing golf balls. Some people came back to. We remember when we left, we took the jacket, we put it over his head like we were like national security, and we ran him to the van that he was driving, and then we get back to the hotel, and a group of people, a couple guys, a couple girls, follow us back to the hotel, and they want to keep hanging out with Bernard Langer. And we pull up, we have the war room, where we're doing the video meetings and everything. And we're pulling up YouTube clips of Bernard Langer in like the 96 British Open or whatever it is. And they're watching this and they think it's him. And we're pausing it. What were you thinking right there? And he's playing along with it. And then they got the contact info because they wanted him to come do a fundraiser. They're having a golf tournament. Yeah, so that was one.
That was one of the funniest things. And yeah, it was packed house. It was this bar restaurant and you couldn't get a seat. And somebody just like, hey, we got this guy. He's in town for this. And they're like, really? And they like cleared a spot. And again, guys were like going out to their car and getting like, you could just hear trunks opening. They're coming in with golf gloves, spikes. People are just, he's signing. And then, yeah, we got it back to the hotel and he's talking about over like YouTube. Like man, it was one of the most funny, bizarre, bananas nights ever, man. That was crazy.
Yeah, and that's all pre-Instagram and Snap and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. If it was modern day, like there'd be people with phones out, recording it, posting it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
If there was any photos, it was like a disposable with one of
of course, yeah, right. Yeah, that's awesome.
Times were a lot more simple then. So yeah, we were. And it was just like you said, he looks just like him, and he and funny enough, there was just enough darkness, just enough light. It was one of those things where, and it was just the right time at night where it was people had enough in them that they weren't necessarily Inspector Gadget at the point. They were definitely along for the ride. They're excited for it. So
yeah, but did this guy speak German? Like how did you guys cross that bridge?
Yeah, Bernard speaks apparently. That night he spoke perfect
English. That night he spoke English without an accent. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, he said we had him coming out of to Jason's point. We're running like FBI security on him out of like this bar that he gets into the car and drives us home. But no, we've had some really good times.
And well, me, Cam, I think it's to what you said earlier, and coaching is what I do. It's not who I am. And obviously there's a lot of crossover, bringing myself and my personality, my own core values to who I want to be to my coaching life. But like, that's, me, I don't take myself too seriously. I'm constantly looking to seek a good time. I certainly do. We've had some fun ones. And now that I'm in my off season, I get plenty of good stories coming up.
The all-time sewer job there when you flew out to Sioux City, who was it? Darius was performing.
Oh yeah, that was you guys. Well, you were out scouting.
I was out scouting.
You were out scouting. So I get to that same Stony Creek. I get to the hotel. I can't even get into the hotel. The place is like completely packed, and I'm like, you weren't answering your phone because you were like first scouting in the rink or whatever. And I'm like trying to reach Luke. I'm like I can't reach anyone. I don't know what's going on. And then like Luke calls me after. Maybe you call me. You're now in the car getting ready to drive home, and you're like, "Oh yeah, Darius Rucker was at the Tyson Event Center, the rink that we play at, which is in the parking lot of the hotel." And the whole team, everybody's there. I'm just sitting in the hotel by myself, and then everyone's like, "Oh, let's go get beers after." But yeah, well, so but
that was not my finest moment to think of you as I.
Yeah, forgot to mention
Darius was playing, which again, like, it's not like living in Sioux City, Iowa. Darius Rucker coming through there shouldn't move the needle. It's not like this everyday event, and totally got crossed up. But
yeah, we got Nate Bargatze coming in September. So
all right.
We have, you're right. There's not a ton, but you'd be surprised. We get Bob Dylan was just there. We get some surprise names coming through still.
All right. Do they still use the locker room?
No, they use our players' lounge now, and I don't know if in your time, if it was there, you used to go to the Orpheum. I live downtown. The Sioux City Orpheum is one of the coolest venues that I've ever been to. So I go see all my Broadway shows that come through and whatever else there. But yeah, the cultural life in Sioux City is surprising.
Picked up
It's picked up.
since they put the hotel or the Hard Rock in there. Things are a little different than when I was there.
Yeah, yeah. It used to be a riverboat casino. Now we get a Hard Rock. Before you guys wrap up with me, I hope you don't mind. I wanted to ask the Colonel a question while we're here.
Sure.
Because I've heard so much about you just through Cam and our conversations about the team, and now with you guys doing this, and I've listened to the other podcasts, and I'm invested. Just top level, so we don't have to get too deep in it. But I'd be curious from your experiences in the military realm, whether that was on the battlefield or in the command room, wherever that may have been. What would be your biggest takeaway as it relates to practical application for someone like me or Cam? And I mean that more in when you think about the size of our teams, which would be about the same. I have 25 athletes. I probably have a larger staff than Cam does. I have about 10 staff members that work with me. And you obviously have a great feel for the environment now, but I'm just curious because I think for us, it's a fine line. I know, at least for me, I speak, that there's just so much to be learned from, your field as it relates to leadership and execution and those kind of things. We have to be very careful because we understand that we're playing a game and there's nothing similar as it relates to that. But if you just think of practical applications from some of the leadership lessons, when you think about our size and our environment, what's the first one or two takeaways for someone like us?
Cam always says, he would say that your experience is so much different. And Jace, I would say it's really not. I would say leadership is leadership is leadership. And I would say that what I tried to do, the environment that I tried to create and how I tried to treat people, the one takeaway is like, I think that when you look back at Jace Kersner and people think I had him as a head coach and I was 18 years old or 19 years old, now I'm going to go play at Michigan or I'm going to go play at BU or I'm going to go in the NHL and all that sort of stuff. They may not remember leadership, culture, behavior, success. They may not remember all that sort of stuff or results, but they'll remember what coach said as an example. They'll remember how you made them feel. They'll remember the environment by which the Sioux City Musketeers operated in and how the associate and assistant coaches made them feel. And that to me is probably the one thing that is most similar, because that same sort of gut feeling that I had, that same sensation, whether it was walking into the briefing room and I was getting ready to go fly a 16-hour mission or 17-hour mission and support guys on the ground, that is the same thing that whether you're getting ready to go play 3 periods of the most intense hockey that you've played probably all year long, going to battle and potential loss of life and going to battle and battling for 20 minutes. The relationships that you establish to go be successful in the battle space and the relationships that you establish and how you train people and the culture that you establish to go spend 20 minutes on the ice and try to go win a game. I would argue, Jace, that there are many, many more similarities than there are differences. And I think ultimately it comes down to, and you've been talking about it for the last hour plus, how you treat those players. Do I treat them with dignity and respect? Do I make them want to come back in the next day? Is the door open because I want it to be open because a book told me to say that? Or is my leadership experiences that I have, they lend themselves to that? The nugget that I would say is there's a lot more in common than there's not in common. And that I think that culture that you establish and the behaviors that you want the players to have, those aren't just the 1 year or 2 years that they have at the Sioux City Musketeers. Those are going to follow them all the way through their professional and personal lives. In the context of what Cam said before, I've never been to Sioux City in my life. Heck, I've never been to Iowa in my life, but I want to be a part of the Sioux City Musketeers because of what you're saying and the emotions that you're eliciting just from listening to you speak. So, and those are the same things that I would hope that that as I'm talking to my team, and 25 to 35 people, just in the Air Force, that's a flight of people, right? There are people that are in charge of that makes up a squadron, which makes up a group, which makes up a wing. It doesn't matter how large that organization is. If I'm in charge of 3,000 people, I want to treat those people exactly the same as I would if I was 25 people or 2 people or 1 people. I think there might be a couple nuggets in there, but I would just say that the recipe for success, the recipe that you're creating at Sioux City is the same exact recipe that I would create if I'm in Italy or if I'm in Afghanistan, or if I'm in Oman, or if I'm in Korea, and all that sort of stuff, because it comes down to the people foundation and the trust piece that you're establishing. So again, a lot more similarities than there are differences.
I really appreciate you sharing. I did take some notes. And Cam, I'll flip that to you. What's your ability to work with the Colonel the last couple of years on a more day-to-day basis? What's the one thing that you know now that you maybe wish you knew a few years ago prior to kind of delving into this relationship?
Out of all the things, Matt's empowered me to just be myself. And again, there's some guardrails on there, but in our sport, I think there's a lot of that type A. There's a lot of, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not me per se. And so that right away creates that inferiority complex of like, if I'm going to do this and it doesn't look the same, right? And I came up, Jason, a little different than you, where I had those coaches and I had that D1 resume. And so I had this thing that I kind of looked like, not that we like won a lot or anything, but you're still kind of associated with it. And then I had these other feelings where like, I want to treat people this way and I want to do this, want this to be important. And then all of a sudden, and I talked to Matt about it today, like just well before I stepped away from coaching, I got to D3, and Jason, just as well as anyone, like my life changed dramatically. I came to D3 life looking as a stepping stone, right? Looking to get back to the D1, to the NHL, to whatever. And then I found the relationships and I came in backwards. But working with Colonel Smith was just constant reaffirming that was what it was. At the end of the day, one team gets to win the whole thing, right? But that doesn't mean we can't have significant impact and leave that legacy with those people, that when those people have an issue, that they call us, that they bounce things off of us, that we are important input into those lives. And really, that helped me define success differently. You've been instrumental in a lot of those, talk about stress and wanting to win and things. And you and I have had those conversations. So again, maybe it's a little bit of an echo chamber for you, Jace, because you're hearing it from both sides. But I just think that Matt was a guy in this, both in title, in rank, in aura, right? His resume of what he's accomplished, to find out that this guy with all of that chops at the brass tacks treats people the exact same, and that's like not only okay, but that's actually like a superpower. That's what I believe he's done for me. I think that's what I did for our guys, and that's the legacy that I hope that I left with those players.
Well, I love it, and I do appreciate you guys both sharing and taking a little extra time from your evenings. But I mean, Matt, I've heard so much about you over the last few years and your involvement with Cam and his teams and his personal life. So I'm honored and pleasure to be able to spend some time, with you, because I felt like I did know you in some regards, and that's that intellectual curiosity, the opportunity to just get a couple takeaways matters to me.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I know you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't love the hockey culture and the people you come in contact with. And again, I played a lot of sports growing up, and I think my passion for the environment that is created by and through hockey has just been just like literally the highlight of my life. Like, and I mean this, Jace. Like, I'm in the picture, right, at Norwich in the team photo on the left-hand side, second row down. Like, I know you guys have been in 100 hockey pictures, 150, whatever, and all that sort of stuff. But like that, just knowing what it means to be a part of that team and the folks that are on that team, whether it's the trainers or the equipment managers or the coaches, the players, all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's what life is all about. I just think the hockey culture is special, and if anyone can get to participate in it, either as a Zam driver or somebody who manages the rink or does whatever, I just think your life will be fulfilled much in a much greater capacity if that can be part of, your sort of your cross check in life. Cross check in the sense of aviation.
I like it. Well, Jace, hey, listen, man, I appreciate you, and thank you for everything. Thanks for taking the time today, but thanks for obviously years of friendship, and really, really look forward to continued growth and continued conversations, and we'll have to check in with you again as the season's going. Maybe we'll get like a in season.
Yeah, we can do a mid-season recap. See if we're see if we're working.
There you go. I like it. All right,
Yeah.
brother. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chase.